Welcome on into the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. Back at it on a Wednesday. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in to the Utah Blockcast this season. It's been a lot of fun. Obviously, this week is a little bit different in terms of tone and all of that. Given last week's 34-10 loss to Texas Tech, I think Utah fans are starting to turn the page this week to West Virginia and looking ahead to the matchup this Saturday. And to help you do that, I welcomed on Mike J. Asti of West Virginia Sports Now to help me kind of break down and preview the matchup. That is today's episode. But first, before we dive into our 30-plus minute conversation, got some things that I just want to run through on this episode. And we had the opportunity, obviously, on Monday to hear from Coach Whittingham in his press conference. We also talked to some of the offensive players, Devin Dampier, Tobias Merriweather, and Micah Simon on Monday. On Tuesday, we heard from John O'Hall, Jackson Benny, and Coach Whittingham again, as well as Luther Ellis, just to kind of get a sense of where this team is at coming off of the loss. And I think for a lot of us, this is a big week in terms of what we need to see from Utah this weekend against the Mountaineers. And I think this is a significant opportunity for Utah's leadership to shine. And we've talked about it throughout the week. This is a big bounce back week for Utah. You have to bounce back and you have to provide a resounding performance against the Mountaineers. This is one of those games where you look at the matchup on paper and a lot of things tilt in Utah's favor. And so it's going to be important and really telling of the leadership on this year's team if we do, in fact, see that sort of resounding bounce back effort against West Virginia. After a loss like the one Utah suffered against Texas Tech, the key is resetting mentally and physically. And obviously the Red Raiders exposed some issues, particularly issues on offense that led to issues for the defense late in the game. And so this is the week where, we need to see some changes. We need to see some adjustments and see how Utah counters what the Red Raiders did, because the blueprint is out there. And this is going to be important for Devin Dampier, for the passing attack, to sort of get some things going in conference play. So the Utes have a chance to show fans and the Big 12 that, last week's loss isn't going to be the game that defines this team. And obviously West Virginia is a program going through transition and currently going through a significant rash of injuries, on their own end. So this is an opportunity in terms of, when you talk about a get right game, this is that sort of game. And Utah has to go into Morgantown and take care of business. So, with this game, Devin Dampier, the running game, they have to be sharp from the jump, taking care of the football, getting into a rhythm and maintaining that, which should allow them to capitalize on scoring opportunities throughout the game. And again, with Dampier, with his health, it does sound like he's in a better place than he was last week. What does that look like in terms of, his ability to execute the offense this weekend? I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him and what he does specifically. Does he return to form as a runner? Does he regain some of that explosiveness? More importantly, though, what sort of improvement and progress does he make in the passing game? I think that's where a lot of Utah fans are going to be keyed in on with him this week against this West Virginia Mountaineer defense. And to the Mountaineers' credit, this is a tough defense. This is a defense that's giving up about 20 points per game. They're aggressive. They get after the quarterback. I think they have three guys in the top 15 in the Big 12 conference that are generating pressure, that are, in the top 15 in sacks. So this is a defense that may not have the first off the bus type of body types, but they've got athletes and they've got scheme that could create some problems for Utah if they don't establish and take control of the line of scrimmage with that offensive line. Defensively, this West Virginia offense is, man, the injury list has grown exponentially with players on that side of the ball for the Mountaineers. they're going to very likely be starting a new quarterback. They're missing a handful of skill players at running back, at receiver, a handful of offensive linemen as well. So when you look at the matchup on this side of the ball, it's going to be important for the Utah defense to go in there and sort of set the tone like they have through the first 4 games, right? Setting the tone, playing a tough, stingy brand of defense, and as long as they do that, limiting who should be starting is Jalen Henderson, the quarterback, backup quarterback. He's a bit more of an athlete, maybe not offering as much in the passing game. Stopping the run, taking away that option attack is going to be the priority for Utah in this one. Now, with Utah moving forward this week, Coach Whittingham confirmed that Hunter Andrews is lost for the season. Unfortunately, he suffered a season-ending injury against Texas Tech. I think a lot of people saw him hobbling off the field. Unfortunately, it is a season-ending injury. It's a serious one, and one that's going to take time for him to get back. So, obviously, for him, you hope that he's able to recover, make a full recovery, and get back on the field, this offseason and hopefully return and lead Utah next year. But for Utah, obviously, this season, it's going to be tough to replace Hunter Andrews. And, because he is such a unique athlete, right? He's a tight end fullback. He's an H-back. He's a running back. He spent time at both spots throughout the offseason. And, he provided sort of a unique look to this off with his, skill set, with his athleticism, his size. The similarities between him and Brant Kuithe were long, right? There were a lot of similarities between the two. I think, Brant certainly offered a little bit more in the passing game and as a route runner, but Hunter Andrews, very similar in terms of athlete, body type, ability with the ball in his hands, given that background as a running back. So, he's not going to be an easy one to replace because he is such a unique athlete. But there will be ways for Utah to replace his production, and I think this is an opportunity where Otto Tia can certainly set up or step up for Utah this week potentially, and certainly this season. He is a little bit different in terms of the type of athlete and type of presence and threat he provides on the field. He's not going to give you much in the run game like Hunter Andrews was capable of doing, but he can provide you a little bit more in the passing game. And it's going to be important for Tia to take advantage of his opportunities, to do the little things, to secure the catch, to secure the ball, and all of that sort of stuff. He needs to capitalize on these opportunities that, could be provided to him. So I think first and foremost, when talking about replacing Hunter Andrews, the conversation starts with Otto Tia. And again, this is an opportunity for him making the move from receiver to tight end this offseason. This is an opportunity potentially for him to step up and help this Utah offense. So with those two things, those two little tidbits out of the way, I want to get to my conversation with Mike. I thought it was really insightful. He provided a lot of information and opinions on this West Virginia team and program, with Rich Rod returning to Morgantown. And for Utah, I like this matchup, this game, as sort of a get-right game for Utah. It's unfortunate to see the injury list be what it is for West Virginia. Frankly, I wouldn't mind seeing Rich Rod punking Whittingham with the injury report, maybe seeing some of these guys that could potentially be listed on it and playing. I wouldn't hate seeing that just because I'm so sick and tired of this conversation centering around Utah and how they manipulate the injury report. I would just love to see it. I'm not suggesting that we need to do that, but I hate this conversation this week. So anyways, but again, like I said, I think this is a matchup for Utah to get right because, this is a defense that is tough. It doesn't have the type of body types and athletes that are, elite, but they've got good athletes. They've got good bodies and they've got a scheme that really creates some problems. So this is going to be a game where the offense can't just roll out of bed and assume control of this game. They're still going to have to earn it. They're going to have to earn control of the line of scrimmage. They're going to have to make plays and capitalize on opportunities when they're there. For the defense, it's a little bit of a different story because of the injury list and how it is how it's impacted that Mountaineer offense. They very likely are going to be without their starting quarterback, uh, two of their top four running backs, their top wide receiver, a handful of offensive linemen. So this is a matchup for this Utah defense where you have to establish control. You have to set the tone and get those stops early on in the game to give your offense, ample opportunity to get the ball into the end zone and sort of establish control there. So this is a game that, if Utah goes into Morgantown and, brings that business-like mentality, this is a game where they should win comfortably, but they're going to have to earn it. So anyways, enough from me. Let's get to my conversation with Mike J. Asti and hear from him. All right, Mike. Appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, man.
Mike J. Asti of WV Sports Now. Man, like I said, I appreciate you hopping on, taking some time to talk through the West Virginia Mountaineers and sort of previewing the matchup with Utah coming into town. Man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm covering college football and dealing with two young daughters, one a 3-year-old who's now fully into toddler, and the other one almost 4 months old. So,
Oh, wow.
Aside from the media career, that's another job. So I'm dealing with everything going on and able to take some time to jump on this with you, which is easier said than done.
Yeah, I understand that fully. I've got a 2.5-year-old, so
Okay.
I understand that completely, man. So again, I know the time is valuable.
I will tell you, even 2.5 to 3, there's a transition there. My daughter now at 3 trolls me. She's very intelligent. She's very sarcastic. She's fully into the personality that I didn't see as much even 6 months ago. So it'll be interesting what your transition looks like 6 months from now.
Yeah,
with yours.
absolutely, man. Well, that's great. And so, Mike, we'd just be curious, kind of your background. How long have you been in the industry? How long have you been covering, West Virginia athletics?
Sure. Well, in terms of media in general, about a decade or so. I am also a WVU alum, so I'll put that out there. But in media in general or so, about a decade. And my background, really, I've kind of done it all in terms of calling games, in terms of written content, writing for major legacy outlets. I spent a time with the Tribune Review in Pittsburgh, a lot of digital in my career, and then radio as well, large radio background going from college to different outlets, mostly in the Pittsburgh media region, which does encompass West Virginia as part of the DMA. Been covering West Virginia on a beat here, WVU Athletics, for probably about 5 years now, but also did do some in college. So way back, and then took a break, covered other things, and then now back covering the Mountaineers. But I've covered the Steelers, Pirates, Penguins, all through the Pittsburgh pro scene. And then, of course, covering West Virginia now on the college side of things. And again, I've done it all in terms of every aspect of media. Been with legacy outlets, been with digital platforms like West Virginia Sports Now. And currently, I do some national work with Yardbarker, national writing with Yardbarker, as well as what I do with the Pittsburgh Sports Now group and WVSN covering West Virginia. On Sirius XM, have a podcast of my own, Mic Drop, that's played on Sirius, and then different other shows and different other ventures that I'm always involved in. And then, of course, adding in, again, taking care of my two daughters is another job. So it's been a long, interesting, bizarre journey, but I've always been involved in some respect, and mostly now focused on covering West Virginia and then other talk shows.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's incredible. Honestly, like that is a list. That is a resume.
Well, that's even a brief part of the resume. I could go deeper, but so that's a brief synopsis of the resume right now of kind of what I've done. It's kind of been all over the place at different times, but major legacy outlets, Tribune Review, WPXI in the Pittsburgh region. Then, of course, now kind of what I'm doing now. So it's been all over the place, been all over the map, but dipped my toe in kind of every different avenue of media. That's why everybody is these days. I'm sure you are as well, but everyone's a multimedia journalist if you are a journalist. Uh,
Yep.
so I still call myself a journalist, but more of a multimedia journalist. No one's really just one thing these days, and that's not been
Yep.
my career either.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. Certainly doing more video
Yeah,
podcasting and all that
yeah,
sort of stuff. It's been,
yeah, but
a new element for I think a lot of us
yeah,
to learn and embrace, over the last couple of years. So that's great, Mike.
for
And
sure.
again, it's clear you've got a lot of history there in that region. And I know,
Yeah,
for Utah fans, there are going to be quite a few fans making that trip to Morgantown and flying into Pittsburgh. And I'm sure, like myself, it's going to be the first time for a lot of us there in that Pittsburgh, Morgantown region.
okay.
What sort of recommendations do you have for the folks that are traveling to Morgantown this weekend?
Yeah, so in Morgantown, it's a typical college town. It's going to be that atmosphere, especially for a conference game. And I would 100% recommend Tudor's Biscuit World. That's a West Virginia staple
Okay.
beyond even Morgantown. That's breakfast food, that's biscuits. That's going to put meat on your bones. So that wouldn't be
Love it.
something that I would recommend if you're going to be there for a weekend. I don't know if I would do it every day. I don't know if I would do it twice a day, but you hit it up once and it'll stick with you. So Tudor's Biscuit World for a sports bar, Kegler's. These are free plugs
Hecklers.
I'm throwing out
Okay.
there, but these are some of
Yeah.
my favorites. Kegler's. They throw cheese inside the meat, so it's the best kind of burnt cheese, but somehow it ends up in the meat. They're not even doing it intentionally, but somehow it gets there as well as
Yeah.
around the burger when they're making a mean burger for you. Wings are there as well. Big TVs all around. If anyone's going to still stay on Sunday and leave later at night, NFL games, great place to
Yeah.
watch NFL games. That's actually where they do and where they film the Rich Rodriguez weekly show, where his radio
Oh,
show
okay.
is filmed there. Ross Hodge for basketball will be filmed there as well. So that's kind of a sports spot. And DPDO, but for Calzone, that's on other college campuses as well. But that's a big one there, more downtown. There's a few of them. You do a nice Google
Yeah.
search, you're going to see it's a typical college town. So food is open, generally speaking. Some, not all of these, but some places until 4 a.m. It's a little different than Pittsburgh
Okay.
in a pro
Right.
city. You can't really eat anywhere outside of fast food after maybe midnight. In Morgantown, no, you can get some places to deliver to you even till around 4 in the morning. So, and of course, there are some in Morgantown, but certainly in the Pittsburgh region. You'll see it at the airport as well. Permane Brothers, everyone will bring up more of a national staple, putting fries and coleslaw on the sandwich. It's
Okay.
down there in Morgantown as well, but that's more of a national thing you're see in the Food Network. It's good, but I don't know, maybe kind of overrated if you need some recommendations, some local really, yeah, Kegler's,
Some
Tudor's Biscuit
genuine
World,
Morgantown
yeah,
type
some
stuff. Yeah.
genuine Morgantown type stuff for
Okay.
sure. If that's what you're looking for, then definitely Tudor's, definitely Kegler's, and I'll let you know when I see you down there if there's any
Yeah.
others that come off of my mind or can tip you off as well. But yeah, it's a great food college town for sure.
Ooh. All right. That's good to hear. I'm
Yeah,
excited to get out there and I'll have all Friday to hit up some of these spots. So I'm looking
yeah,
forward to it. And I know, like I said, a lot of Utah fans are going to be making that trip out to Morgantown
yeah,
for the very first time. And you know, I think let's dive into West Virginia and Rich Rodriguez making his return to Morgantown to lead the
yeah,
Mountaineers program.
yeah.
Big picture, Mike. What has this done for West Virginia? What has it meant having Rich Rod back, and what have you seen so far with the program and the overall vibes since his hiring and return?
Yeah. It's interesting we're speaking now, coming off an embarrassing loss and with so many players
Yeah.
hurt and kind of so far a disappointing first quarter of the season, I guess. But overall, since Rich Rod's hiring in December until now, it's been kind of a jolt and an injection of life into the program. If you look at the history of the program, the 6 years under Neil Brown, and I covered a lot of him. He's a great guy. He did have the year where he kind of proved national doubters wrong, where people said they were a MAC team and they won 9
Mhm.
games and got in the coaches poll. He had that moment. He did win a couple bowl games, but overall, that 6 year stretch is the darkest period for the West Virginia football program since the late 70s. And
Wow.
it wasn't 6 years in a row where they were bad in the late 70s. 75, they won the Peach Bowl, won 9 games. It was only a couple years at the end before Don Nalen took over. If you go prior to that, you're talking the 30s. So there's
Wow.
been a level of success that was just not established during Neil Brown's tenure. He didn't get them ranked in the Associated Press poll once, any week in all 6 of those years. They got
Wow.
in the coaches
Yeah.
poll at the end of 23, but not in the AP poll at all. That's a standard that I don't think anyone would argue is below the West Virginia program. And Rich Rod being hired off the success he had in his first tenure, where it certainly argues is maybe the most successful tenure in program history, where they were a national contender for sure, especially towards the end, has made fans feel, okay, let me remember what it was. Let me harken back to what it was. What's old is new. Pat White's on the staff. Noah Devine's on the staff. They're giving you memories and video clips and billboards about the past. But there's still a belief that because of the success he had at Jacksonville State, because he did have success at Arizona, even though it was 10 years ago at the power level, granted Michigan didn't work out, that Rich Rod, a Hall of Fame coach in his own right, can get the program rolling again. And it may take some time, but eventually they start winning. Eventually they're contenders. His programs always play hard. They play with that hard edge that he always brings up, and fans always know they're going to play hard, and they like his brand of football that maybe they didn't like under Neil Brown. And despite his exit, ending with some controversy and people still having some ill will over that, there are some fans that just flat out hate him and would rather win with anybody else, would just don't want to win with him and are rooting against him. I get comments and articles all the time. This is what happens when you do business with Rich Rod. There are people that are still upset at Rich Rod from 17, 18 years ago. But for the most part, the fan base just wants to friggin' win, and they'll sell their soul to whoever can give it victories. And they believe Rich Rod can. And most people kind of forgave what happened. He cried in his intro presser. He's done all these interviews talking about what he regrets, and he's done all the right things and said all the right things to this point in terms of repairing that relationship. However, now with all the injuries, I think a lot of fans are kind of also dropping into, well, maybe this is going to take some time. He made some comments in the offseason. Oh, you can win right away in this era. Kurt Signetti did it. Arizona State won worse the first. He would cite those examples. 2001, when he took over 20 years ago, it was 3-8. They were so bad. But in this era, you can change the roster. You don't have to deal with whatever's, provided to you. You can go into the portal and bring in 80 new players like he did.
Yeah.
And he had a belief that they could win right away. And now you're hearing Rich Rod talk about how it's going to be a process, talk about how to win right away. You need some luck. They haven't been getting that luck with all the injuries. Talking about how, I'm not too upset because it's only year one and I'm going to win. But if we don't do it this year, I'm not going to cry about it. We have year two, etc. And that's kind of where the fan base has moved to a little bit, especially with everybody hurt, even though they're 2-2, but granted 0-1 in conference play. So I think there's an injection of life and belief that the program will eventually get turned around and will eventually be good again. How good and if they're really a national contender maybe will be a question that some debate. When that'll happen is a whole nother story, but no one's really believing it's going to happen this year now. And I think most are at least satisfied that he got the Brackyard Brawl win. He beat Pitt, got the rivalry win, took care of business there. They're not going to play Pitt until 2029 now, so there's no way they can get kind of an answer on it. Yeah, they're taking a break. So once that was done, I think most fans can kind of deal with whatever. But the hype that was there of, we're going to win right away, we're going to contend in the Big 12 right away, that dissipated. But there's still an injection of some excitement that just has been gone. The program and really the fans have been very toxic over the last 6 years under Neil Brown, as you could imagine. I mean, now, especially towards the end.
Yeah, I can certainly imagine following it from afar and all
there
that.
There were billboards up everywhere. Fire Neil Brown last year. I mean, it was rough. I'd imagine for him even to drive. It got really, really ugly. Towards the end. Yeah,
that is pretty ugly. And yeah, like you said, getting the big rivalry win in the Backyard Brawl, that was a big one. I did not anticipate that one. I thought Pittsburgh was gonna take care of business, but that was surprising.
Yeah.
And so to get that win, obviously following it up the next week, losing to Kansas on the road, that's a tough one. But what have you learned about the football team this season, through these first 4 games?
Yeah, it definitely shows you the difference of a week and how things can change in
Yeah.
college
Oh,
football in a
trust
week.
us. Yeah.
They
Utah fans feel the same way after a week.
Sure, I'd imagine. Although they're lost a little better maybe, but we'll see. And yeah, even Utah fans a year ago they entered thinking, okay, we're just going to
Right.
dominate the Big 12 after what happened in the Pac-12, and that was not the case at all.
No.
So you just never know. I would say something that this West Virginia team has shown this year, which provides optimism for the future, is they have really shown an aggressiveness on defense that was not there last year. So last year's secondary especially was one of the worst in the country going back to the backyard brawl. They should have beat Pitt last year. They had a 10-point lead in Pittsburgh against Pitt last year with a better roster and NFL players, and they blew that game because they couldn't stop Eli Holstein, and the secondary allowed 10 points in 4 minutes at the end of that game, and then they lost. They flipped Pitt flipped the script in terms of blowing the game against West Virginia this year, so it kind of got flipped on its head as they end the current series. But this year's West Virginia defense can force turnovers, can really cause fits for any opposing quarterback, can really bring the pressure. They get turnovers, they generate sacks, they play with an aggressiveness, sometimes maybe even too much. Fred Perry got a targeting call in the Kansas game, and everyone, even Zach Allen, admitted, like, no, that's helmet to helmet. You can't be doing that. So they play with an aggressiveness and a hunger that was not evident last year. Now, they did get blown out in the game, but generally speaking, when you play with that aggressiveness, you don't get blown out that often. You at least appreciate the effort of the team. Red zone wise, they've been able to stop teams. They're a great defense overall. The other loss against Ohio, which is a really, really bad loss, obviously,
Yeah.
the defense forced 3 turnovers on Parker Navarro. They played better than Rutgers played against him. That defense played well. That Ohio offense scores 30 points against everyone, and they held them to 17. And really, that was the worst day I've seen of any film for Parker Navarro since he really took over there. But they didn't win because the offense just can't do enough, and that's the other end of it. The offense has been very inconsistent this year, even struggling in the first week game against an FCS and Robert Morris, who actually is a Pittsburgh school, so a regional opponent. But they really struggled in the beginning of that game. They certainly struggled in Athens against Ohio, against the group of 5. They were really, really inconsistent and just barely could move the ball at times. They had 1 touchdown and then a series of punts and miscues of their own. And then, of course, they finally got going in the backyard brawl, but had a third quarter where they barely could move it as Rich Rod rotates his quarterbacks. That not his always guaranteed success. Some maybe move the ball, some do not, but he rotates nonetheless. And against Kansas, it took until basically the end when the game was decided to get into the end zone, and they got blown out. So defense good, offense very inconsistent, and a lot of injuries also throughout, and especially going into this matchup, Utah is going to get the most banged up Mountaineer team that any team has faced so far this year.
Well, that transitions perfectly here. Curious with the health status. There've been a lot of tweets about how just the laundry list of players that could be listed as questionable, doubtful, out. What do you make of the health report and health status of the Mountaineers?
Yeah, it almost felt like attending Rich Rod's weekly press conference this year that he was kind of hosting a funeral of not only the roster but even the season, and we're still only a handful of games into this thing here. It's
not a great vibe.
It was not a great vibe, but it's a big flip on where he was months ago when he was talking about we're going to go ahead and win the Big 12 in year 1. It just doesn't feel happening based on all the injuries. And yeah, so West Virginia starting quarterback this year that already came under fire, and many people kind of wanted to see the next guy up. They do a rotation, but Nico Markill's been the starter. He played high school ball in Arizona, so
yes,
West Coast fans maybe were from Colorado, played high school ball in Arizona, but now he's back in Colorado getting tested for a foot injury that he self-reported to the coaching staff they were not aware of at Kansas. He didn't play well there at all. And he did jumpstart them and help lead the way in the backyard brawl. It's good or bad Nico. It's Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He had a great showing at the end of the backyard brawl, led him to a big win. He'll be remembered forever for winning that brawl. And then Kansas overthrowing receivers, looked totally off. -4 yards rushing in a Rich Rodriguez offense.
Ooh,
I don't
yeah,
think anyone needs to be an analyst to tell you that's not going to work. If you know anything
yeah,
about Rich Rod, the quarterback cannot have -4 yards. They're lucky they didn't lose by 60 points. It could have been worse. So he had that bad game, but now he's hurt. He's listed as questionable, but I would imagine a guy getting tested away from the program middle of the week is not playing, especially when
yeah,
they have a rotation. He's coming off a poor game, and Rich Rod was honest in saying that even if he gets a green light of being healthy, then any of these guys that are getting tested and get a green light on Thursday or Friday, they're behind in reps. And for anyone who doesn't know how Rich Rod works, maybe for better or worse, and some are annoyed with this, he really goes off practice. The
hmm,
players out there that are great in games and college and the NFL that don't really, dog it in practice, you'll never get an opportunity under Rich Rod. You got to show him in practice. So if you're missing
yeah,
reps, even if you're the best athlete, he's going to have you limited in the game. That's just how he operates. So Nico likely won't play. That likely means Jalen Henderson, who is a Power 4 transfer from Texas A&M that was
yeah.
a former top recruit. He's not looked good in the spring. He looked a little better in the fall, but looked still shaky. Was injured a lot last year. Looked like he was shaking some rust off. He's looked up and down, certainly through the air, up and down. Went in so far this year. Can run. I kind of have the hot take that he provides a little higher of a ceiling for the Rich Rod offense on the ground as a runner than Nico
Yeah.
does. So there's a chance for Utah fans. It could be a weird blessing in disguise for West Virginia, and maybe this actually is a better. Maybe they're dealing with more of a spread offense than the other teams have faced because Jalen Henderson could run more and is faster. That is possible. So
Interesting.
he likely will start, I would imagine. But beyond that, Preston Fox, who was there under Neil Brown, a veteran wide receiver, he's questionable. Ty Edwards, who had 141 yards and 3 touchdowns, did not play against Kansas. He is questionable. He likely probably is not playing. And going into Kansas, he wasn't even on the injury report at all until he became a game time decision and then didn't play.
Oh man.
Livingston, the center, he's a veteran as well. He's questionable, got hurt towards the end of the Kansas game. There's a myriad of players. There's honestly 5 or 6 of them, I believe, that were even discussed at the presser, and there's 3 or 4 more that I haven't even got to. Those are the major players, but
Wow.
they are very banged up. They have multiple injuries on the offensive line. They have a few defensive injuries. Obviously, Fox and Reed Carrico got banged up recently, although he did come back. Chase Wilson, who was a great linebacker from the Ohio game, tried to really save that game and keep him in it. He's been hurt. Some of these transfers are hurt and are out. They are a very banged up team. And Rich Rod
Yeah.
even said, we desperately need an open or a bye week. And they don't get one until after BYU. So they play
Oh,
BYU on the road after Utah and then have a bye.
oh,
So who knows if they'll get healthy in that bye, but for this Utah game, they have many starters out, and it likely will be the first game with a different starting quarterback this year.
that's interesting. And obviously with Utah, a lot of talk about that injury report from Utah's end of things with Devin Dampier and
Yeah.
and his injury. And from what I can share, it does sound like he is in a better place with that ankle. And I don't anticipate him being included on the injury report this week. I do think, we're not going to have to worry about any sort of drama. I think he's in better shape,
Okay.
but I wouldn't be surprised in terms of Utah's health. There being a couple, maybe a defensive lineman that we didn't see last week in Aliki Vamahi. Maybe we see him on that list. We might see the other freshman defensive tackle, Carson Kafusi, who was on the list last week. I think he'll be off of that this week. So, I think it's interesting because, like you said, West Virginia, you've still got another game beyond this one to get to the bye week. For
Yeah.
Utah, it's this game, and then they get to the bye week. So I
Yeah,
think
that's nice.
Utah's.
That's
I
nice.
think.
It's nice a little bit, especially after traveling, because Utah has to travel, and then West Virginia has to end this home game, and then go to
Mhm.
Utah and play a good BYU team. And what I didn't even mention is irrelevant for this game because they're out for the year. But Jaden Bray, who Big 12 fans know from his Oklahoma State days, a part of the
Yep.
last real good Gundy team that went to the Big 12 championship game, he is hurt, out for the year, and he was there even last year, and he got hurt and ended up out for the year after week 2 both seasons. So
Jeez.
he is out for the year again. And
Yeah.
then separate from that, Jaheim White, who was on the Doak Walker Award list entering the
Yeah,
season, he is a great running back, has been there for a couple years, really had people believing he could fit into the Rich Rod mold and unlock him even more than he was under Neil Brown. There were
me.
some people I saw nationally that were picking him as like their dark horse,
Hmm.
Big 12 offensive player of the year if West Virginia would win, etc. Out for the year. He got hurt in the Ohio game. So the only defense of the Ohio game is the first half had all their star players get hurt and Jaheim didn't come
Oh
back.
man.
But Jaheim's out for the year. So Ty Edwards wasn't even supposed to be able to have the opportunity in the brawl if Jaheim was healthy, but Jaheim out for the year. So the players that were there preseason that were going to be relied upon are mostly out, or mostly either questionable, out, or out for the year
Ugh,
for West Virginia. But we will see, because they gave a lot of opportunities in the offseason to a lot of players because they were doing a position evaluation at every single position. So the only saving grace is if any team can afford all these injuries, not that they have the depth and they're going to, I'm sure, lose a lot of games this year, but in terms of figuring out who they can play, it kind of would be this coaching staff in this year, because they worked out everybody all offseason.
right.
There was nobody, even Jaheim White, who walked in number one on the depth chart. The depth chart's been or every week. So Utah fan, don't even look at it. Don't even look
Yeah.
at it. It's just or
Gotcha.
or. So they have guys. It's not like any of these guys who are going to now get chances haven't played at all. They've been rotating players. They've all been playing. It's not like anyone's going to just debut in the middle of the season. That's a little saving grace in terms of experience, but no, their major contributors are out, and that's a bad thing for the West Virginia
Gotcha.
Mountaineers.
Gotcha. Well, with this offense, 15th in the conference in terms of scoring, but
Yeah.
really solid numbers in terms of rushing offense. I think they're fourth in the conference at just over 200 yards per game. Passing game, a little bit of a struggle, 12th in the conference. And as you talked about, Jalen Henderson, that's going to be the big question mark. He does seem like a better athlete, but in terms of his passing acumen, we'll see. And then to
Yeah.
to your point earlier about the defense, you look at the turnover margin, and what I noted was, -3. They were dead last in the conference in turnover margin. But then you started talking about the takeaways, and I was really impressed. 6 takeaways from this defense, right?
Yeah.
Which that's a very solid number. The issue is, and you made this point as well, 9 giveaways for the offense, and it's just kind of like
Yeah.
tough. So,
Yeah.
what do you make of?
And not many points off the turnovers.
Yeah,
Against Ohio, I don't think they scored off any of them. And then even in the other games, you're talking field goals. Yeah, they haven't cashed in enough, even though they've been able to pick up those turnovers. And Zach Alley has literally said that if his defenses through his career get 3 turnovers a game on an average, they usually end up in the top 15 and the team usually wins.
right.
That anomaly looks like it's about to be changed this year, because he's getting 3 a game and they are not winning, and they are not ranked anywhere near in the top 10. The offense needs to help them out, and they're not doing enough of it.
Gotcha. So let's shift gears and talk about that defense, because it is doing some impressive things. Like you said,
Yeah.
the aggressiveness, getting after the quarterback. I think they have 3 in the top 15 in the conference in terms of sacks, with Chase Wilson, Edward Vesterinen, and Hammond Russell,
Yeah.
notching each at least a couple sacks. What has been the difference with this defense, and what's allowed it to find success on that side of the ball?
I do think Zach Alley is a major part of it. I really like him as a defensive coordinator. He gives you a Rich Rod vibe. He's very aggressive. Someone even asked him going into the brawl with Edmund Reed, pitch star running back, who was a preseason All-American for some, and he got hurt in that game. But someone asked the question, well, going into a game like this, when there's such a weapon on the other side, do you look to contain somebody and just look for a certain bar, minimize it here to a certain number, and then maybe you'll have success? And he said, I don't accept that. I want to stop everybody on every single play. I don't want him to gain a yard. And it's like, that's hard to believe, but you have to. I kind of love that. If I was a player, I'd imagine, like, you kind of love that mentality. You got to go in with that mentality, whether it's going to happen or not. And he works them very hard in practice. So Zach Alley's aggressiveness is different than what's been there. And that, I think, has really been a major driving force of this defense playing better. You can look at some of the transfer additions to some of those players you mentioned. Hammond Russell and Eddie Vesterinen were there last year. and they weren't stars. They were depth pieces.
Wow.
Eddie V got hurt, to his credit, but they weren't as good as they've already been. So Zach Alley's elevated guys defensively and helped bring this defense to a certain level. Now, they definitely had rough moments against Kansas, though. It's not a perfect defense. They generate turnovers. They're aggressive. I like watching them more than last year's, where you knew they were just going to give up chunks of yards and there was no chance. Problem is, against Kansas, when they faced a mobile quarterback in Jalen Daniels, he was able to gash him on the ground. They couldn't really contain him. They missed tackles in that game. They're far from perfect. But if this team is going to win, if they're going to upset Utah, if they're going to get victories this year and make a bowl or more, they're going to have to do it on the back of the defense. The defense is going to have to generate turnovers, and they got to cut out the missed tackle issue that has also plagued them at times this year, especially against mobile quarterbacks.
Well, I'd be interested then, Mike, with this game, and as we're talking about it, obviously, you know, when you're dealing with this sort of injury report, it's going to be tough, right? Utah's coming into this pretty healthy, compared to West Virginia, really healthy, and so for you, in your eyes, what do you think are going to be the key factors, and do you have a score prediction or just sort of a feel for what this game could be?
Yeah, it's almost impossible to predict West Virginia to win this game right now. Utah was a ranked team. Yeah, they lost. They're coming off a loss, but they lost to a ranked team.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe fans are down because it wasn't a close game, but they still lost to a ranked team. Utah is still a healthy team with a lot of talent there, even though they're on the road. And West Virginia's won the home games and lost the road games. So maybe that's part of it. This game, if it was in Utah, maybe the spread would even be double what it is. But there's a reason why this is a double-digit point spread, because of all the injuries and West Virginia kind of down right now. And you could even argue that we're going to find out, because Pitt was just off a bye. Maybe the win over Pitt was against an average team. I mean, I kind of thought Pitt was overrated going into this year. We're going to find out if that's really true. Is that really a quality win? Same thing that happened with Pitt last year. They bragged about beating West Virginia for weeks. I'm sure you saw, and then you realize, well, West Virginia's not that good. We may figure that out this year. I'd imagine Utah wins this. I would go probably 32-16, something like that. Maybe. I think Utah probably wins this convincingly. The only way Utah does not win this convincingly for me, there's only two possibilities here, and I think Utah wins the battle of the trenches pretty convincingly as well with their lines, which is also what allows this to be such a dominating win for Utah. But because there's NFL players there on the Utah lines, and West Virginia is looking at some players they're trying to get there that just aren't there yet, and also dealing with some injuries. But the only way this is a chance for West Virginia to make this a close game, to make this a competitive game, or even freaking win this game would be either they generate a lot of turnovers again and they cash in on them. They got to cash in on them.
Yeah.
Generate the turnovers and cash in on them. They got to win the field position again. I'll add that, because Oliver Straw is actually one of the better punters in the whole Big 12. So that does usually help them in terms of pinning the opponent back, or in it they can certainly drive up the field. And then separate from all of that, we need to see Jalen Henderson do the Rich Rod offense thing. We need to see Jalen Henderson with his legs rush for 100+ yards, get in the end zone with his legs, move the chains with his legs, and kind of do what Jalen Daniels did to the Mountaineers to Utah. If Jalen Henderson can move the ball, mostly likely with his legs, he's not Pat White at all, but if he can move the ball with his legs and maybe not kill him through the air and do enough through the air, then maybe this offense can hang. If not, and Jalen Henderson plays like he's been from what I've seen, where it's hot and cold, assuming, again, he's the starter and Nico doesn't play, then it's probably a big win for Utah.
Yeah, Mike, I think I'm with you there. Obviously, this is all going to be about Utah going into Morgantown, a hostile environment. Excited to see the crowd there, and it for them, it's going to be about handling that adversity, handling the crowd, and taking care of business. Because as we're talking about, right, Utah has a couple NFL guys on, in the trenches. And as long as they perform up to their standard, this is a game that Utah should, which is why Vegas is projecting it a double-digit margin, right? Yeah. This is a game that Utah should control. And so that's going to be the key for me, is as long as Utah establishes control of the line of scrimmage, I think generating the run game and generating production there, Jalen Henderson is going to be interesting because, as you said, I'm somewhat familiar with Henderson because I know Utah flirted with him in the transfer portal
Okay.
this past year a little bit. So familiar with his game. He's an athlete. He is your prototypical type of,
Yeah.
Rich Rod quarterback. And I think
Yeah.
that is kind of an interesting factor here. But again, just with the injury report, it's hard to see, Utah not going into Morgantown and taking care of business. But I do think it's going to be tough given the crowd and given sort of the respect that Kyle Whittingham has for Rich Rod. I still think this is going to be a pretty competitive game, but it's going to be up to Utah to play to their standard and to kind of not allow Texas Tech to beat them twice. And that's going to be an interesting thing to see from this team. So I'm with you there. I think, 35, 32, somewhere in there, 14, 16, something like that. I'm right there with you, in terms of this game.
Yeah, and then that would be covering the spread. I didn't think Kansas would cover the spread, even though I thought they would probably win, and they ended up covering the spread and then some. We also will see what kind of crowd is there. Obviously, they're 2 weeks removed from the Brawl win, and that was a rocking crowd. But that Kansas game really did cut the vibes down. As I said at the open of the show, Rich Rod's tone has kind of been next year, all the injuries. This year's just not in the cards for us. That's been calmed down. And then ever since he kind of calmed down the hype, I've seen Mountaineer fans posting all over social media, I'm selling tickets. Do you want to go to this game? So it might not be the atmosphere that stereotypical 60K college town packed in there for the Mountaineers. It could be a smaller crowd. And if it gets out of hand, you could start seeing fans leave. It might not, unfortunately, be the atmosphere that you want because they're coming off a real bad loss. And now they're basically have been told we're not worrying about the year. So I don't, the motivation to get down there, maybe not as high. So if you would have got, if this was the game after the Brawl, I think you'd maybe get what you want in terms of the atmosphere. I think they kind of, going on the road and then losing that way kind of maybe pop the balloon a bit. So we will see. But the turnover margin and Jalen Henderson will be interesting. And honestly, I would never wish injury on anybody. And Nico Markiel is a great kid, and he's had his moments. He's going to be remembered for a long time. I always thought, even entering the year, that the ceiling with him just wasn't high enough. I didn't think he was going to be fast enough or be enough of a Rich Rod quarterback to win you 9-10 games and contend in the Big 12, even if he can kind of manage games. With his wins, he's managed games. The only game that he's lit up the defense and dominated like a 4-star recruit should is at Arizona last year. If you pull that film,
interesting.
He looked amazing against Arizona. I don't know if that was just motivated himself or whatever, but that was the kid that was supposed to come out of high school was at that game. The other games, he's mostly managed the victories, but Jalen Henderson to me gives a higher ceiling. Granted, it also could be a worse floor because he does not pass as well at all.
Gotcha.
But so I kind of want to see what Henderson can do. And again, maybe there's a blessing in disguise that Nico just kind of looked off, that maybe getting him out of there and getting Henderson in, maybe Rich Rod goes back to really old school spread 20 years ago offense and a lot of runs and quarterback keepers. And I guess Utah's going into a bye, so it wouldn't matter. But at the very least, they may spend some more time in the hot tub and have to run around a little bit more with Henderson out there than with Nico Markiel. So we will see. I mean, that is the, there are some Mountaineer fans that are trying to really get their brains to run wild. And if you go way back, Pat White's career got started, and Henderson's a senior, but Pat White's career got started after an injury to a quarterback that actually was winning, and Adam McNarick. And that was around week 4 or 5. And then out of nowhere, in the middle of that Louisville game, they came back and White's running all over the place and became a legend and never left the field after that for the Mountaineers. So
interesting.
There are some that let those dreams take over, but is that reality? Probably not. I'm just interested to see what Jalen Henderson can do.
Mike, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on with me and let the people know where they can find your work and where they can, read some of your stuff.
Yeah, so our coverage of this will be at West Virginia Sports Now. I can be found on social media there at Mike ASTI11 and Yardbarker for some national work, and then my podcasts everywhere you get your podcasts, Sirius, etc. So happy to do it. Happy to jump on. I guess I'll be seeing you in the press box.
Yep.
So I'll see you down there, and again, get some Tudor's biscuits, and we'll see what kind of game we end up checking out this Saturday.
Should be really interesting. Mike, appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, man.